All right, in other good news, let's take a look at how labor unions could shape the 2024 presidential election.
Labor unions are proving to be a driving factor leading up to the 2024 presidential election. New polling from the AFL-CIO finds that 2/3 of all Americans support labor unions. 88% of those under the age of 30 said they believe in the power of union organizing. Ray Zaccaro joins us now. He's Director of Public Affairs for the AFL-CIO, and one of the things that means is there's probably nobody at the White House. He can't get on the phone pretty quickly. Ray, it's good to see you.
Major, it's so good to see you. It's been a while.
Ray, how would you describe the current state of the Biden re-election campaign?
Look, I think this president has the most remarkable record to run on. We've never seen a president in recent history that is as pro-labor as President Biden.
Immediately the dick riding begins. Listen, the NLRB is doing some good shit, right? Doing some good shit, even though they're not going after Howard Schultz nearly hard enough for union busting, right? But Joe Biden, not pro-labor, okay? Make no mistakes. Just because he's got a decent NLRB in place doesn't mean that he's pro-labor, all right? He broke up the rail workers union. He could have gotten a massive deal if he would have just backed them, but he's a coward, so no, he's not.
And the fact is his record speaks for itself. But what I find really extraordinary is the uprise in popularity of labor unions that you just showed on that graphic from the poll that we released last week. It is a staggering number that 88% of people in America 30 and under are enthusiastically supportive of labor unions. And this president, look, Major, you've been covering politics a long time.
Train workers are not workers, right? It's ridiculous, man. It's ridiculous. Now, there has been, okay, I believe this was recent here. Today, the board issued a decision in Chemex Construction Materials Pacific, LLC, announcing a new framework for determining when employees are required to bargain with unions. Employers are required to bargain with unions without a representation election. The new framework will both effectuate employees' right to bargain through representatives of their own choosing and prove the fairness and integrity of board-conducted elections. Under the new framework, this is important here, when a union requests recognition on the basis that a majority of employees in an appropriate bargaining unit have designated the union as their representative, an employer must either recognize and bargain with the union or promptly file an RM petition seeking an election. However, if an employer who seeks an election commits any unfair labor practices, i.e. union busting, captive audience meetings, taking down pro-union materials in the workplace, or telling their employees that they don't need a union, if they commit any unfair labor practice that would require setting aside the election, the petition will be dismissed, and rather than rerunning the election, the board will order the employer to recognize and bargain with the union. This is big. This is huge. This is a big win for like everybody who is currently trying to organize a union with the Southern Service Workers Union, with the Starbucks Workers United, with all the unions across the country that are forming. This is massive. If you are caught union busting, you immediately have to start bargaining in good faith. You have to recognize their union, and you have to start bargaining immediately. Can we bait them into this? You won't even have to bait them into it. Now, the problem with this is whether or not you can prove intent to union bust, right? If you can prove that, which intent is literally, I mean, if any court would accept material interest as intent, like you as an employer have a material interest in, stopping a union from happening, because it's not in your interest for a union to form. If a court will accept that, then, easy peasy. Is this nationwide or a specific state? This is an order that came down from the NLRB. This is national. The National Labor Relations Board. Call center union, that's what I'm saying. The board explained that the revised framework represents an effort to better effectuate employers' right to bargain, employees' right to bargain, through their chosen representative, while acknowledging that employers have an option to invoke the statutory provision allowing them to pursue a board election. When employers pursue this option, the new standard will promote a fair election environment by more effectively disincentivizing employers from committing unfair labor practices. The new Chemex standard differs from the historical Joy Silk standard, which required an employer to bargain with a union, unless it had a good faith doubt in the union's majority status. Right. So either they recognize the union, or they file an RM petition for someone to adjudicate that union election, which oftentimes in the process of doing, they are actively doing union busting methods, like captive audience meetings and whatnot, which would immediately prompt them to recognize and start bargaining. This is good, but this is not an order from the president. The problem with that is actually getting the NLRB to actually have teeth. We still don't have a single Starbucks contract anywhere in the U.S. Exactly. Forming a union is not the hard part. It is difficult, but that first contract is the hard part. Now, this is good. This is big. The new rules on overtime thresholds is also big. You'll notice, though, that these are half measures. They are good, but they are half measures. If they wanted to have any teeth in this new ruling here, it would be if an employer seeks an election, commits any unfair labor practice, that would require setting aside the election. The petition would be dismissed, and this is my own take on this, the employees would then own the company. It would be expropriated from the CEO and would then be operated on a democratic cooperative model. And all of the profits therein would be distributed amongst the employer or employees democratically. You engage in union busting, you engage in unfair labor practices, you're immediately capped. There is no playing around with that shit. Yeah, all your bargain belongs to us. That's how you should approach these things. And depending on the importance of the firm, if this is like a utility company, if this is like a telecommunications company, like some kind of fuel or agriculture, whatever it is, if it's an essential service, it's immediately brought into the fold of the state. It's brought into the fold of the state. It is overseen by a labor board of that given state, Texas, Louisiana, whatever it is, and is operated on a democratic cooperative model. But Joe Biden is not going to do that. Joe Biden still believes in free markets. Joe Biden himself says he's a capitalist. So he's not going to do that shit.
You'd have to really search your memory bank to go back to find a president who used the word union in as many speeches as often as his president does.
Yes, I remember covering Bill Clinton. He didn't do it that often. He did, not under duress, but in selective places, selective audiences. President Obama leaned in a little bit more, but not nearly as much as President Biden.
Right. Well, I think President Biden's record is clear here, which is why we made an...
No, President Biden recognizes what the guy who he was competing against in the last election was running on. He recognizes the power of supporting workers. That even pseudo-populist left rhetoric, which is, pseudo-populist is just saying, I support unions. Workers built this country. True populism would be utilizing the bully pulpit to aid in that organizational effort. Being on the picket line. I haven't seen Joe Biden on a single picket. Biggest Hollywood strike in American history is currently going on. I haven't seen the president there once. I haven't seen the president at a single Starbucks or Amazon picket event or union event. It's all theater. He recognizes the value of it. He recognizes the, aesthetics. He did the railroad thing, though. Oh, wait. Oh, shit. Yeah. You only need anything he says that he's pro-labor. Oh, look at all this stuff my NLRB has done. You only have to bring up Precision Rail. Bring up Norfolk Southern. and immediately anything he has to say is shut down. You broke a strike effort. The workers at the rail company did not get what they wanted. You talked down union leadership because you were afraid of what a supply chain crisis would do to your approval rating. Instead of properly framing the issue that this is not the fault of the rail workers, that this is not the fault of the president, it is directly the fault of the rail companies, and then making moves to nationalize them. You could have done that. You could have said, okay, you don't listen to the rail workers, we're going to nationalize you. You're not going to be a private company anymore. You could have gotten real dark Brandon on it, but you chose not to because you're a coward. Let's just nationalize all the Forbes 100 lists and then watch the rest of the corporation shape up pretty quick. That's what I'm saying. Start with the Sackler family first, just as an example. You know, just as an example. You know, I think we can parade them through the streets for a little bit, and then we go after BlackRock and Vanguard. You want to fix this shit? Those are the two entities you have to go after.
Historic decision early on to endorse President Biden right away. And we had an extraordinary event in Philadelphia back in June where we saw it was a labor union member-driven event. Everybody that spoke there, with the exception of the President of the United States, were labor union members. The support across the board for President Biden with union members is very strong. But what's also strong is the support for unions across America. You know, we're seeing 71% of Americans support labor unions, support union activism right now. And I think that speaks to the political climate that we're in and why this president stands a really great chance of re-election because of the support of labor unions and his support of working people in America.
Ray, to clarify, you don't harbor...
It's marketing, dog. It's straight up marketing. It's trying to position himself as pro-labor. You can't even say you're pro-labor if you don't raise the minimum wage. Just saying you support unions is not enough. Unions are, just fair. Unions are just fair. Whenever you act directly against, the rank and file membership of a union, you're not pro-labor. But, if you can't even raise the minimum wage, as you promised on the campaign trail, you're not pro-labor, man. Because the majority of people making minimum wage are not in unions. I would go I don't have any numbers to back this up, but I would go so far as to say nobody in a union job is making minimum wage, because that's what unions are there for, is to get you more money. I don't recall Biden ever saying out loud that he's pro-union. Oh no, he's said it several times. He can't shut the fuck up about it. Unions built this country. Unions are the fair way for you to guarantee a quality of life for your family. He said it a bunch. He's not pro-union. He's not even pro-labor. He's just fucking doing this. He's doing this because he recognizes, and even Republicans at this point, even though they're virulently anti-union, Democrats are too, but at least not as loudly as Republicans, but even Republicans recognize, the rhetoric of, the working class is popular. Workers generate value, not CEOs and owners. Yeah. Most pro-union president, Jack, is LARPing. It's advertising is what it is. It's marketing. Not just money, safety, and benefits. Yeah, of course. Most union contracts are at least 20% more than minimum wage, and they raise the wages of non-unionized labor in the same sector in that region. You're working at a fucking packing facility, and you unionize, other packing facilities in your areas get raises as well, because they got to compete. Yeah, rising tide and all. If Joe Biden wanted to prove himself as pro-labor, one, he would show up to pickets. That's just good advertising. That's good marketing, even if you don't care. But two, he would raise the minimum wage. He would put in more protections for unionizing workers. He would put in tax incentives for businesses to operate as cooperatives. He would direct credit unions with some type of incentive to offer more loans for people to start worker cooperatives, because that is one of the big issues we encounter in America when people say, oh, well, if worker cooperatives and democratic models are so good, why don't people just start those instead? Well, banks are less likely to loan to people who want to start them because there's no incentive to return that investment. They don't operate off of the profit motive. So if Biden really wanted to show how pro-labor he is, he would do stuff like that. Also, being pro-labor isn't simply within like the purview of the NLRB. Being pro-labor means rent controls. Being pro-labor means mixed-use zoning. Being pro-labor means investments in infrastructure. Being pro-labor means actual like regulations on vehicle manufacturing that goes after companies that skirt cafe standards. That's pro-labor. Being pro-labor means actually tackling climate change. The fact that the minimum wage in certain states is $7.25 is fucking sickening. It's $7.25 in Louisiana. Here's something. Okay, you really want to fuck up the market? You really want to shake things up as a pro-labor president? Here's what you do. You go after the people who are never represented. Service workers. You put forward a law that it is illegal for restaurant owners to pay their wait staff $2.13 an hour, or $0.00 if their tips make minimum wage. You do that shit, and you are locked in for the entire service sector to vote for you. Raise the minimum wage, make it illegal to pay servers anything other than the minimum wage. Straight up. Can we get rid of tipping altogether and just pay workers better? You would see people tipping less. You would see people tipping less, and that is a good thing. When you don't have to rely on those tips, you would actually get better service. What about the small businesses? Listen, it's the thing we've always said. Is it cruel to small businesses who with all their good intentions, have tried to make a business where they pay their people as much as they can, where they try and make it work for everybody? If they fall under, that is a sacrifice that has to be made. Will bigger companies be able to weather the storm of increased wages until things level out? Yeah, of course. But at the end of the day, it's this thing we always say. If you can't pay your people enough, you should not be in business. Y'all, this is the reason me and my mom have always wanted to start a business. We've had like a bunch of different schemes we've come up with over the years, but the problem always arrived at 1, you can't start a business when you're poor, and 2, you can't start a business when you want to treat people fairly out the gate. We have never been able to start a business simply because of those 2 factors. Too poor, can't treat people fairly. Those types of barriers to entry, both financial and moral, are too much for so many people to bear. There are people probably in this chat who would love to start their own little thing, like community garden or whatever, cooperative model you want, farmer's market, whatever the fuck, that simply can't because of financial barriers that are put on the working class so that you are stuck in the working class as a laborer. But yeah, if Biden really wanted to be a pro-labor president, he could do shit. Actually, let's tweet this. Let's tweet this out. Raise a minimum wage like he said he would on the campaign trail. It's not complicated or difficult. Direct the NLRB to enforce minimum wage laws on restaurants who are paying servers $2.13 an hour, $0 if tips equal minimum wage. Pass whatever laws are necessary to enforce this. Actually supporting unions means showing up to picket lines and nationalizing essential industries like rail, healthcare, agriculture, etc. Nationalize any industry that has benefited from government subsidies in the last 50 years. Utilize antitrust laws to break up ISP companies to direct a telecom czar to implement municipal broadband projects across rural America where majority of households don't even have access to stable broadband. Eminent domain any Airbnb property and direct municipalities to put those properties into public housing. Foreign ownership caps on housing, and expand on the recent NLRB ruling that any company engaging in unfair labor practices or union busting must either immediately yield to the union's contract demands or forfeit ownership to the workers through a democratic co-op model. If he were to ever do this in real life, it would straight up, it would be the most aggressively pro-labor policy platform in history. Beijing Biden coming in hot.